Hi, my name's Ashley Morris, Field Marketing Manager at Tealium, and I have the pleasure of thanking you all for joining the third webinar in our series, Summer of Data Love Playlist. Now more than ever, we're seeing that customer experience really is the new battleground, and regardless of your industry, consumers have high expectations. To innovate today, you need to be able to understand your customers through data. You need to be tuned into their needs, their interests, their privacy requests, and their expectations. At Tealium, we believe there are 5 principles for creating meaningful customer experiences based on data. And this also serves as our framework for this 5-week summer series. To help you remember these principles, we've come up with the acronym TUNED. Trusted, unified, now, everywhere, and delight. The third principle and the focus of today's session is now. Buyers expect experiences to be in the moment and accurate. Data needs to be real time, which is where we're going to spend some time today. Before we begin today's webinar, Making a Real-Time Splash, Engaging Customers in the Moments That Matter, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. This webinar will last approximately 30 minutes and will be recorded. The recording will be made available after the session. We have some related resources available for you in the attachments and links section of the platform, so please feel free to engage with them at any point. If there's something that you find helpful or important during this webinar, we encourage you to share socially, and you can mention @Tealium and @Braze. We want to hear your questions. Please use the Q&A feature to submit them during the presentation. For any questions that we aren't able to answer live, we'll definitely follow up with you after. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to today's speakers. Brian Moore serves as an integrated solutions architect at Tealium, where he works closely with technology partners like Braze, uncovering new ways to integrate and optimize Tealium integrations for mutual customers. As an evangelist at Braze, Majid Nuhukan addresses the company's global vision for customer engagement and how Braze can help brands feel empowered to create more meaningful human conversations with their customers. And with that, let's get started. Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Ashley. And thank you to everybody for joining today. Just a quick summary of what we're going to be discussing, sort of the current mobile landscape, especially in the age of COVID and as consumer habits change and evolve into a new normal. We'll discuss some moments that matter that we think are key opportunities for brands to engage with their customers in a true one-to-one fashion, leveraging technologies like Tealium and Braze. We've got some use case examples of mutual customers, and we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. All right.
Awesome. First of all, thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Brian, for that introduction. Super excited to be a part of this webinar. So I want to start by talking about the change in today's world. In today's world, your consumers have the opportunity to interact with multiple devices and platforms at the same time. I still remember the first time I got my smartphone. It was like 10 years ago. And when I got it, I had about 10 different apps. But today, an average person has about 60 to 90 different apps on their phone. And we have also seen the development of smartwatches. We have seen the development of Alexa. Who would have thought 10 years ago that we would be sitting at home interacting with home devices like Alexa's and Google Home? And there is a constant rise of devices over the last several years. And also, if you look at the channel side, there has been a constant evolution of channels like emails, SMS, web push notifications, mobile push notifications, in-app messages. And with all of these evolutions, the way that your consumers interact with your brand has been changing, and also the way that you interact with your consumers has also been changing. So the question that I want to ask all of you today, to all of you brands watching this webinar, is that are you keeping up with that change? What is that you have done to keep up with the evolution of devices to interact with your audience in a different way? And what is that you have done so far to change your marketing strategy to create that relevant, brilliant customer experiences across all devices and all channels? And if you could go to the next slide, Brian. Customer behaviors and preferences are changing all the time. And as humans, that is the only thing that is permanent in our life. And as a brand, you should be targeting them real time to target those consumers with their changing behaviors and preferences to create that memorable, meaningful conversation.
Absolutely, Majid. Thanks for that highlight of the kind of the current landscape, especially in the US, where our reopening has been unfortunately sort of stymied. Folks are obviously having to change their behaviors all the time. So what we see as an opportunity here in leveraging Tealium with Braze is really to unlock sort of one-to-one messaging and communicate and engage with your customers, really leveraging mobile as the backbone of a new strategy. Brands are beginning to reevaluate their engagement through their channels like mobile, push, SMS, to really unlock new ways of communicating at scale, whereas before maybe they were not a priority.
And Brian, as you mentioned, reevaluating the engagement strategy. What we do as a company every year, we commission a study together with Forrester Consulting, and we ask consumers what do they expect from the brands that they engage with. And the answers we get is not so surprising. Every consumer expect that the brands that they engage with speak to them like a regular person would. And also on top of that, they expect the brands to understand what matters to them the most. And that's how the whole topic is wonderful to talk about today, is that to create moments that matter. And as a consumer, this is one of their topmost expectations from every brand that they interact with. And as a brand, if you can establish basic human level of communication, the results are going to be enormous. And as you see here on the screen, your consumers will be twice more likely be satisfied with your brand if you could establish that communication, and also nearly twice more likely that they would recommend your brands to the friends and colleagues. But also, as we know, every industries that operate out there in the world relies on having loyal customers. And if you could establish human connection with your customers, you would be likely to have 65% more loyal customers. So this is absolutely key when it comes to customer communication strategy. So as a brand, I want you to really take a moment and think about how you can strategize that humanized marketing to your consumers.
Absolutely, Majid. I love this because, especially thinking about the ways my behavior has changed as a consumer in this pandemic, I've really enjoyed the personal touches of some brands, whether it be an actual human connection, like somebody, maybe my Instacart delivery person is able to customize my order because the grocery store was out of something and they found a suitable replacement. Or maybe it's just the awareness that, in a more automated fashion, but still very empathetic from some of the brands that are recognizing the place that their consumers are in today. So with that, we'll jump in and cover some examples of moments that matter, kind of continuing on the examples we've given with the data and the studies, but maybe some real examples of what you can use as a brand. So the first one that's obviously a no-brainer for the retailers out there, but as things shift to e-commerce and mobile ordering and mobile curbside pickup, tracking a recent purchase, whether that be your groceries or something less critical, but nevertheless something that's going to maybe unlock a new consumer behavior in this new normal, in order to get a hold of the delayed shipping or figuring out where things stand. That's something that's not going away. Another one that I really like is, confirming your transportation, whether it's Uber or, the transportation authority that's going to reload your monthly credits in order to board the subway or something like that. Those are hugely critical moments especially for frontline workers or anybody that's having to commute still in this pandemic. The other thing is, as we travel less often, electively anyway, the times that we do choose to travel are going to be much more critical. And then on the subject of housing and finances, a lot of folks are reevaluating their spending habits or considering new lines of credit. You might be like many people taking out a home equity line or something like that in order to get some liquid spending money. These are hugely impactful times in our lives. And it makes sense to kind of pair them with a personalized and one-to-one communication style to treat consumers like more than a number. And finally, we're celebrating holidays during this pandemic, maybe not the ways we would have dreamed. We've got birthdays, Mother's Day, Father's Day, lots of holidays have come and gone now. Even weddings are taking place in this remote lifestyle. So a few examples, and we'll touch on, on specific examples in the coming slides. Before we get into the use cases and customer examples, I wanted to kind of just stress Tealium's positioning in this architecture, if you will, in pairing with a partner like Braze. So Tealium's obviously our prowess is the collection of data from any device or any source, whether it's online, offline, real time, or batched, or whatever system might be driving some customer behavior. We've got the libraries and the footprint of collection to kind of bring that data in and help a brand make sense of it in order to see that customer with an accurate, up-to-date, single view of what their behavior is and what their preferences are. That's really where we can empower a brand or a vendor like Braze in order to activate against that customer profile with all the insight and all of the up-to-date knowledge of the most recent customer behaviors. Okay, so now let's take a look at a more detailed example in the case of home buying. As folks are shifting to remote work, and you might realize your current home office situation isn't suitable for the long term. You might have roommates, or you might have children, or you might have adult children as your roommates. You know, there's a number of things that folks are reassessing as far as their work-life balance in the age of remote work. So let's look at an example of buying a home and how we might leverage Tealium and Braze to understand that customer and cater to their preferences. So we've got an example of somebody who's, you know, maybe anonymous, but we've seen the search behavior of looking for single family homes in the mobile app. Just like we talked about earlier, we want to elevate the conversation. So as it goes through the mobile app behavior, Nicole here might actually be incentivized to authenticate, to maybe save some of her favorite homes that she's seen for sale to a wish list or to a saved search. Eventually, in the journey of this customer, the real estate firm that's offering this experience might match Nicole with one of their agents. In doing so, they would immediately unlock the potential to kind of personalize and get to know Nicole and pairing her with a real agent. There would obviously be a collaborative rapport building and understanding what her preferences are as the agent does their job to find the right places to potentially look. There's going to be a pre-qualification period likely where Nicole's figuring out what she can afford, where she's looking, and whether that matches her budget, and keeping her informed and staying attuned to that pre-qualification process is a huge opportunity for the agent and the real estate firm to properly address where she is in their journey. And then finally, you've got the out of the app experiences. You've got the in-person showings, maybe a virtual showing as it goes, and ultimately hopefully placing an offer and continuing to become a loyal customer. So if we overlay some of the functionality of Tealium and Braze here, Tealium's really sitting at the front end of this journey, where you can see anonymous data collection. We might leverage Braze's integration with Tealium to set user aliases and capturing all of that anonymous behavior, so that once the user authenticates, Braze can really unlock some of the messaging and one-to-one personalization capability. Finally, Magic, go ahead.
No,
sorry.
Go ahead, please go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, just to wrap up this journey of the technology here, we've got the final phases of things taking place outside of the app, where Tealium is primed to receive those events and update the customer profile in real time in order to further personalize with Braze or other channels in our connector marketplace.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Brian. I just got way too excited when you talked about buying a home, because this happened to me when I moved to London. I was searching for an apartment, and my preference is to look for a one-bedroom apartment somewhere in central London. And the moment you start searching for your next home, it's always complicated because the competition is so high, the price is so high, and you just don't have the time again to look for, traveling to different places to view the apartment in person. So one of the brands that I was engaging with here, I had an apartment viewing. I really liked the apartment, but then I felt the price was so high. But then the apartment just did not go. So eventually, 2 weeks later, I get a message from the site that I engaged with saying that the price has gone down by 10%. And that was an exciting news for me, because that brand knew exactly how to target me with a relevant message, because 10% of saving money is adding value. for an individual. And if you do the math for a whole year, that's a lot of money. So in a way, if as a brand, you know what is really meaningful for your consumers, how you can add value, and that is really, really key in engaging with the customers with the right message at the right time. And that's what we advise brands most of the time. And this can be relevant to different industries as well. But for real estate, I do sincerely believe that as and when your users engage, try to understand the preferences, because what we have seen in the past is that preferences and behavior changes all the time. So as and when that changes, you should be capturing those preferences and then target those users with relevant messages. Because as you mentioned, I could be searching for a one-bed apartment, but that could change, let's say 2 years from now when I have a family, and that could change even when I start to make more money, let's say. So the preferences constantly changes, and as a brand, you should be understanding those changing preferences. Brian.
Absolutely. Thanks, Majid. So just to kind of lead into some other customer examples, we wanted to throw some additional statistics out here that personalization leaders today have found the ways to drive up to 30% increases in marketing spend efficiency by deploying product recommendations and triggered communications. So obviously personalization is a huge trend right now for customer experience professionals. In order to kind of get that level of granularity and opportunity, you need a data foundation like Tealium that's going to give you kind of across the board customer experience footprint about their behaviors. So let's take another example from Majid.
Over the course of the presentation, we talked about, moments that matter, relevancy, personalization, and OVERSTOCK being a mutual customer with Braze and Tealium, they know exactly when to engage with their users to create that moment, a specific moment for each individual user. So what you see here is an example of OVERSTOCK targeting their users with the web push to check out their seasonal sale. And depending upon the user's engagement, you have to change your engagement strategy, because you just don't know when they are going to engage. So if they haven't engaged, let's say with the push notifications, you could bring in the cross-channel experience at a very early stage of customer engagement and target those users with the push notification. In my opinion, push notification acts as the sense of urgency. Let's say an offer is running out 24 hours from now, and if you could send a push notification to that specific user, then obviously there is a high chance that they would that would drive them back to your app, and they would make a purchase. And we have seen push notifications playing a vitally important role with the specific use case. And also bringing in email, because as I said, depending upon the engagement history of your users, you just wanted to use the right channel at the right time with the right message, so that at the end of the day, you are targeting your users and finally making them to make a purchase. Because if you look at the marketing funnel, there are so many different stages that a user goes through, and you wanted to follow those users with specific message through the specific channel at every time. And that is key here. And OVERSTOCK has been doing a brilliant job bringing in the cross-channel messaging at a very early stage of customer engagement. And if you could move to the next slide, and this is something that I often get asked about, because when Gmail introduced the promotions tab, oftentimes brands are wondering, how can I get into that promotions tab? How can I stand out in the promotions tab so that the users engage with my email? And the question here is, how can you make sure that the email that you send to your users, whether it's primary tab or whether it's promotions tab, it's going to highlight the key ingredient of that specific email, right? And OVERSTOCK does a brilliant job here highlighting the key value, which is the 14% off discount on that specific product that user has been engaging with. So one another example here is, so let's say I have browsed a specific product in the site, and that product is going out of stock. So OVERSTOCK wants to warn me, saying that, hey, the product that you have been interested in is going to go out of stock. Would you like to go ahead and make a purchase? So these are few of the key things that you can do by highlighting whether it's primary tab or promotions tab to stand out from the crowd. Because as a brand, you want to really think about on a daily basis how many promotional emails a user is receiving. So if you have the opportunity to stand out, please do that, so that there is a high chance that your users would be engaging with your messages.
Awesome. Yeah, just to kind of dovetail another example here, customers are likely to spend 140% more after a positive experience than those that report a negative experience. So again, giving the opportunity to tailor your messaging to ensure a relevant positive experience. I constantly receive abandoned cart emails for things I've already purchased on through another retailer. So, the opportunity here is combining that one-to-one messaging power of Braze with the breadth and strength of real-time data collection and enrichment with Tealium to basically optimize that experience and make sure that it's positive, especially, not just stopping there, but always striving for improvement with experimentation.
One of the challenges most of the brands that have is the classic example, which is cart abandonment, right? So based on the study from Baymont Institute, the average documented online shopping cart abandonment rate is 69%. So that is crazy. So as the marketing budget goes so much into bringing users back to your platform, but at the same time, if your users are abandoning the cart, and that's a lot of money to waste. So the classic example here is that, like I mentioned, the different stages of the funnel, right? For example, receiving a message is one stage of the funnel, engaging with that specific message is another stage of the funnel, and then you would go and browse different products. You like the product, you add those products into the cart. That's the final stage before you place an order. So anything could happen in these different stages. Your users would drop off at any of the stages for different reasons. One example could be, just after adding a product to the cart, I realized the delivery is going to take 2 weeks from now, and I just do not have the time to wait for 2 weeks. So I just ignored the purchase, right? So what 1-800-Flowers does here is to target those users who have already added a specific product into the cart with the promotional message saying there is going to be 15% off on the product that just you have ordered, so that kind of creates an excitement because people can save money. Again, you're talking about adding value. Again, you're talking about creating moments that matter. And you can use those use cases for different occasions. For example, let that be Mother's Day, let that be Valentine's Day, let that be based on the browsing history of your users. You can target and use push notifications to create a sense of urgency so that drives them back to the app and to make the final purchase. And you touched on the testing part, Brian, already. If you could go back, if you could go to the slide 17. So one of the key things with customer engagement, which we always tell the brand, the key to success is testing and adapting to new strategies. So no matter how good your campaigns are performing, the great idea here is to always iterate and to test. So for example, like I mentioned, 1-800-Flowers offering a promo code to consumers, but also at the same time, trying out personalization into their communication strategy, which brought 5% more increase, but also on the other hand, 350% more increase just by targeting those specific users who have already added products to their site. Again, the key, what you see here from this example is that this specific push notification with the promotion code is relevant to me. And as a brand, you should be knowing what is relevant to me rather than creating a group of segments with hundreds and thousands of users, which is not relevant at all. So iterate constantly, test and adapt to new messaging strategies, which would drive more conversion. And that's what we see across the board with different industries.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think, as we summarize what we've talked about here, I think the key takeaway is to listen and understand your customers and their experiences and enabling the data capture about those experiences to create moments that matter, that are personalized and exhibit one-to-one conversational messaging with the customer.
Awesome. Brian, as you mentioned, collecting, understanding, listening to your customer is key. Understanding the data and then act upon those data that you have gathered is key to create brilliant customer experiences. It's all about an individual users, and that's what I always tell marketers. It's all about an individual users, and that's the key takeaway that I wanted to give to our viewers today.
Sweet.
Great. Thanks, Brian and Majid. We appreciate all the insights. It looks like we may have time for a few questions. Here's one from the chat. Brian, this will be pointed to you. Can Tealium be made aware of user engagement to drive cross-channel activity?
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. It's a good question. So we've talked a lot about Braze and their capabilities of activation, but Tealium's kind of footprint and capability for data collection can even extend to things like whether an email has bounced or maybe an NPS score has been completed by a customer with a recent purchase. And depending on the results of those, a bounce is more simple, but an NPS survey might have more rich metadata about it. You can use those events in Tealium to trigger other channel activations or potentially suppression, right? Depending on whether that experience was good or their lifetime value is predicted to maybe not be as high, then maybe we would suppress, high cost retention channels.
Thanks, Brian. Our next question is, do you have any recommendation for brands that create moments during customer onboarding?
Actually, one of the things that we often see is that when a user signs up to your service, that's the first moment that you're going to engage with your users. So depending upon the industry that you operate in, you want to build the trust and transparency from the very beginning. Imagine if you're a car hailing industry, the first thought that comes to people's mind is that how do the brand protect my privacy, security, and as a brand, you want to make sure that you take care of everything along the first step when the user sign up to your services, and that is really key. And again, bringing in cross-channel experiences, because oftentimes we see email as a channel to educate your users about all of the different services that you offer, all of the offers that you provide as a brand. So that's really, really key in bringing cross-channel engagement, again, from the very first moment of customer onboarding, and also to build, again, trust and transparency from the very beginning.
Awesome. Thanks for that perspective, Majid. That's all the time we have for questions. For any that we weren't able to answer live, we'll be sure to follow up with you after. As a thank you for attending our Summer of Data Love playlist series, you have been automatically entered for a chance to win a $100 gift card to Live Nation for a future concert of your choice. The winner will be contacted this afternoon. We also want to remind you that you'll have the opportunity to win a Live Nation gift card for each webinar you attend in the series. And if you join us live for all 5, you'll be entered to win a Music Lovers Prize of your choice valued at over $300. If you found this webinar to be helpful, we encourage you to join again next week for part 4 of the series, Taking the Cross-Channel Plunge, Swan Dive into Consistent Customer Experiences with our partners Quantum Metric and Invoca, where we'll be discussing how you can create seamless experiences using the flow of cross-channel data. Thank you so much for joining us. Please be sure to check out the related resources in the attachment and links section. We'll see you all next time.